It was Christmas evening, the night everyone looked forward to all year. The snow was falling gently outside, dusting the world in a blanket of white. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of fresh pine, cinnamon, and the faint crackle of a fire burning in the hearth. I had been invited to my friend Natalie's Christmas party. She'd been throwing one every year, and I never missed it. Her house, a large old colonial on the outskirts of town, was always full of laughter, friends, and holiday cheer. The house itself was almost like a storybook setting, grand, warm, and inviting. But that night was different. It started off just like every other Christmas party. We all gathered around the living room, exchanging gifts, listening to Christmas music, the usual holiday cheer. The lights on the tree sparkled, and everyone was in high spirits. But as the night wore on, I couldn't shake the strange feeling that something wasn't quite right. It wasn't anything overt, just a slight sense of unease that gnawed at me as I moved through the crowd. A low hum in the air. I thought maybe it was just the usual holiday stress, the pressure of family expectations, but the feeling lingered. Around midnight, after the last of the guests had arrived and the festivities were in full swing, something happened that I couldn't explain. The lights flickered. It was subtle at first, just a brief dimming, but I caught it. A few other people must have noticed too, because the room grew quieter. The chatter slowed and everyone glanced around, waiting for the power to come back. But the lights didn't return to normal. I didn't think much of it. Just some old wiring in the house, I figured. It wasn't unusual for Natalie's place, a house that was nearly 100 years old. But then the temperature dropped. I could feel it in my breath, each exhale visible in the cold air. It was December, sure, but the heat had been cranked up, and yet the room was freezing. Everyone started pulling their sweaters tighter around themselves, and a few people joked about needing to light the fireplace again. But the cold, it wasn't just from the temperature. It was this heavy, unnatural cold, like it was coming from somewhere else. I wandered into the kitchen to grab another drink, hoping the warmth of the kitchen would make me feel better. But when I stepped inside, something felt off. The kitchen light, which had been on a moment ago, was now out, leaving the room bathed in the faint glow of the Christmas lights from the living room. I glanced around, my heart skipping a beat when I saw the back door. It was wide open. I couldn't remember it being open before, and I was sure no one had left. I walked over to close it, thinking maybe someone had stepped outside for a cigarette or to check on the snow. But when I turned the handle, the door didn't budge. It was locked. There was no way it should have been open. I tugged harder, pulling with all my strength, but the door didn't move. A strange chill ran down my spine. I don't know why, but I felt watched. My skin prickled, and I could hear the faint sound of footsteps in the living room, as if someone was walking around in slow, deliberate steps. I shook it off. It was just the house settling, I told myself. Maybe the party had gotten to my head, making me more paranoid than usual. But when I turned back toward the living room, my breath caught in my throat. The room was empty. The laughter, the chatter, all of it was gone. It was just the low hum of the lights flickering and the faint crackle of the fire in the corner. The entire party gone. I turned back, eyes scanning the room. I felt the weight of the silence pressing in on me, and I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. The house. It felt wrong. I slowly walked toward the stairs, calling out, "Natalie? Anyone?" Nothing. No answer. I began to climb the stairs, my feet heavy with dread. As I reached the top, I heard a door creak open, softly at first, then louder, like it was being pushed. A chill washed over me, and I knew something was wrong. I approached the hallway. The bathroom door was ajar. The light flickered behind it, casting strange shadows on the walls. My hand hovered near the doorknob, but before I could open it, the door swung wide as though someone had pushed it from the inside. And then I saw it. In the mirror above the sink, a figure stood behind me. At first, I thought it was my reflection, but then I realized it wasn't. The person standing there wasn't someone I knew. It was a man, pale, almost ghostly, with dark eyes that seemed to suck in the light around him. His features were sharp, his mouth stretched into a grin that was far too wide, too unnatural. I felt my blood run cold. I turned quickly, but there was no one in the hallway. The bathroom was empty. I stumbled back, trying to catch my breath. I didn't know what to think, whether it was exhaustion, the weird atmosphere, or if I was just imagining things. But as I looked around, something caught my eye. A figure standing at the end of the hallway. It was him again. The man. This time he wasn't just standing there. He was walking toward me, slow, deliberate, his footsteps soft against the wooden floorboards. And then the lights went out. The entire house plunged into darkness. I could feel the air grow thick around me, oppressive, suffocating. I couldn't breathe, and I could hear him, his footsteps getting closer. The sound of him breathing deep and ragged. I backed away, trying to reach the stairs, but my legs were frozen in place. My throat was dry, and I could feel his eyes on me, even though I couldn't see him. Then out of nowhere the lights flashed back on, bright and blinding, and for a moment everything was still. But when I opened my eyes, the hallway was empty. The man was gone. I ran down the stairs, panicked now, searching the entire house. I called for Natalie, but no answer. I checked every room, but it was as if the house had swallowed everyone whole. The front door was locked, just like the back one, but I didn't care anymore. I had to get out. I finally managed to break the door open, and I ran into the night, not stopping until I reached the street. That was the last time I ever went to Natalie's Christmas party. I don't know what happened that night, or who or what was in that house. But it wasn't just a trick of the mind. I felt it. I know I did. There's a part of me that wonders if it's still there, waiting for someone to come back, to step into that house one more time. But for me, I'll never forget that night. And I never will, because whatever it wasn't finished. It's still out there. If this story sent a chill down your spine, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more. Trust me, there are many more stories to come, and you don't want to miss a single one. It was the Christmas party to end all Christmas parties. My name's Sam, and I'll be honest with you, before that night, I wasn't the superstitious type. I had never believed in ghosts or curses or any of that otherworldly stuff. But after that Christmas, I don't know what I believe anymore. It all started at my best friend Rachel's house. She had recently moved into an old farmhouse just outside of town, a place with a lot of history and character, an ideal spot for a cozy, intimate Christmas gathering. The house itself was gorgeous, but it had that certain charm that came with age, creaky floorboards, drafty windows, and a winding staircase that led to rooms and hallways that seemed to go on forever. The kind of house that made you feel like you were stepping back in time. Perfect for a Christmas party, right? Rachel had gone all out for the party. We had Christmas lights strung from every corner, the smell of roasting turkey wafting through the air, and a crackling fire in the stone fireplace. Friends were mingling, laughing, drinking spiced wine, and exchanging stories. It was everything you'd expect from a holiday gathering, warm, inviting, and full of life. But there was something strange about the place, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Around midnight, after everyone had eaten and settled into the living room, we all gathered around the tree to exchange our secret Santa gifts. That's when it happened. The lights flickered. At first, it was nothing too alarming, just a quick blink, like a power surge or a loose wire. But it didn't stop. The lights flickered again, until they finally went out completely. For a moment, there was complete silence, and then people started laughing, thinking it was just some kind of prank. Rachel, trying to keep the mood light, grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen and shined it around the room. But when her beam landed on the corner of the living room, her expression changed. She looked confused, then worried. "What's that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We all turned, following her gaze. In the corner, just past the shadow of the Christmas tree, was a small wooden chest. It wasn't there a second ago. I was certain of it. There had been no chest in that corner when we set up the room earlier, and it was old, very old. The wood was worn, cracked in places, with strange symbols carved into the sides, symbols I didn't recognize. "Rachel, where did that come from?" I asked, my voice tight. Rachel shook her head, her face pale. "I don't know. It wasn't here earlier. I swear I didn't know what to think, but it was the last thing I wanted to focus on. The power was still out, and it felt like the whole atmosphere had shifted. I wasn't the only one feeling it. I could tell everyone else was on edge too. But curiosity got the best of us. Rachel slowly walked over to the chest and knelt beside it, her fingers trembling as she reached to open it. When the lid creaked open, I felt a cold gust of air, chillier than the winter wind outside. The room seemed to grow even darker, as if the shadows were closing in. Inside the chest was an old, tattered book. The pages looked yellowed, and the leather cover was cracked, as if it had been lying there for centuries. Rachel hesitated, but then she opened the book. The moment she did, the temperature in the room dropped, and an unnatural silence filled the air. It was as if time itself had stopped. The fire in the hearth flickered erratically, casting odd shadows on the walls, and the air smelled strange, like something long forgotten, something ancient. Rachel started reading aloud. I could barely make out the words. The language sounded foreign, like a dialect that didn't belong in this world. At first, it seemed harmless enough, just random phrases, but then the book began to hum, softly at first, like a distant whisper, then louder, until the hum was a low, bone-chilling drone. We all froze. I felt a hand on my shoulder, and when I turned, I saw that my friend Marcus was standing behind me, his face ashen. "Stop her, Sam! Stop her now!" he said, his voice shaking. But it was too late. Rachel read the last line, and as she did, the room went completely dark. The fire went out, and the house seemed to groan under some unseen weight. I heard something moving, slow and deliberate, just outside the living room. It was a dragging sound, like feet shuffling across the floor, but the steps were uneven, as if whoever, or whatever it was, had a limp. I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. "Rachel, close the book," I pleaded, my voice trembling. But she wouldn't stop reading. The footsteps grew closer. Suddenly, the door to the living room slammed shut. We all screamed, trying to force it open, but it wouldn't budge. The air was suffocating, thick and heavy. The book started to glow faintly in Rachel's hands, a sickly green light that pulsed like a heartbeat. And that's when we saw it. A figure, dark and formless, appeared in the doorway. It was tall, taller than any man, and it moved with an unsettling fluidity, as if it was gliding across the floor. Its face was a blur, indistinct, but its eyes, those eyes, I'll never forget them. They were hollow, empty pits, staring directly at us with an intensity that made my stomach turn. I couldn't breathe. My body went cold, like the life was draining out of me. Rachel dropped the book, her face filled with terror. As she let it fall, the figure reached toward her. The air itself seemed to vibrate, like the house was shaking. The figure spoke. Its voice wasn't human, not at all. It was low, guttural, like a growl that came from the depths of the earth. "You shouldn't have opened it." The voice echoed, reverberating in our bones, and then the lights flickered back on. The figure vanished, leaving only the faint scent of something decayed and ancient in the air. We were left in complete silence, our hearts pounding in our chests. We never saw the book again. Rachel tried to close the chest, but when she reached for it, it had disappeared. The house felt different now, as if it were no longer the same. There was something about the walls that felt oppressive. We all left that night, and none of us returned. I can't explain what happened that night. All I know is that whatever that thing was, whatever was awakened, is still out there. And I can't help but feel that it's waiting for someone else to open that chest, to call it back into our world. I don't know if Rachel's house is still standing, or if anyone has dared to move in since. But I do know one thing for sure. The next Christmas, I wasn't celebrating anywhere near a farmhouse, or anything even remotely like it.